thank you very much for inviting me here today. Hopefully you can all hear me, hopefully you can all understand me. Like Icelanders, I do tend to speak quite quickly, so if I speak too fast, please just shout out and I'll try and slow it down a bit. Okay, so I'm going to start with an apology. As Hrafnar said, I'm from the most northerly part of Scotland, in Shetland, but despite being from Shetland, which used to belong to Norway for 500 years, I have no Nordic language capacity at all. So in my time here in Iceland, I've recognised a few words that I know. These are some Scottish equivalents of Iceland words that I've heard and seen so far. But I've decided to remedy the situation. I've decided to learn some Icelandic. And I thought I'd start with what is possibly the most important phrase in any country. So this is my Icelandic so far. So I hope to build on that before I leave. And by the time I come back to your beautiful country, I should be fluent. I might even be able to ask for a gin and tonic. So thank you hugely to the Landvernd team for inviting me over here. It's an absolute privilege to be here in Iceland, in your beautiful city and this fabulous building. It's absolutely amazing, so thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about how we've linked Eco-Schools to the curriculum in Scotland. We've been doing Eco-Schools for a long time in Scotland, since 1995, and in that time there's been a lot of change in terms of government, there's been a lot of change in terms of our curriculum, and what we've done is to try and adapt and enhance the Eco-Schools programme to ensure that it remains relevant and useful for teachers and for learners. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the policy context that we have in Scotland. This has been very important in terms of realigning the programme, in terms of reinforcing the programme. And then I'll get into what that has meant in terms of linking to the curriculum. Tell you a little bit about our curriculum. Like yours, it's quite a new curriculum. Tell you about the work we've done to try and map our curriculum against Eco-Schools topics and themes, and then give you some of an indication of some of the other things we've done to try and make sure that the curriculum and Eco-Schools complement each other. I'll then tell you a little bit about some of the next things that we're planning, because the work is by no means over. And then if there's any questions at the end, please just ask. Okay, but do let me know if I'm going too fast, because... Yeah. Okay, so the policy context, first of all. There are three things in Scotland that have really shaped Eco-Schools, particularly in the last 10 years. The first thing, obviously, Scottish Government itself. We have a certain amount of devolved government from the whole of the UK, and one of their remits is education. So education in Scotland is controlled in Scotland. We have a completely different curriculum to the rest of the UK. The second thing is the UN Decade for Sustainable Development Education. This has had a big impact nationally and internationally, and our government has done a lot of work to try and make our curriculum and our learners be part of that. The third thing is our Teaching Council in Scotland, which has been a very strong supporter of sustainable development over the years. And there's been some very exciting recent developments which have really helped to get that even stronger in our schools. So the first thing, Scottish Government. We're quite lucky in that no matter who's been in power, we've enjoyed support for Eco-Schools over the past 10 to 15 years. And also, crucially, money. Times are hard everywhere. We're not sure if the funding will continue beyond 2015, but we do hope so, fingers crossed. And Eco-Schools in 2001 was made a performance indicator for our local municipalities. So it was something that they were measured against. Participation in the programme became not mandatory. We've never made it compulsory to do Eco-Schools, but there was certainly a measurement there in terms of participation, which saw our numbers increase hugely. But in terms of the government, Eco-Schools is seen and it's mentioned as a key mechanism, a key method of delivering a lot of our government's outputs. Scotland's a small country. They're trying wherever possible to ensure that all parts of society are joined up when it comes to environmental and sustainable themes. So a lot of the policies that are coming out now reflect across the whole of Scottish society. So the Zero Waste Plan, which came out in 2010, reflects of business, industry, households, and education. The same for the Climate Change Declaration 2009, and also strategies around biodiversity across Scotland, with obviously local variations depending on the problems and issues they face, and sustainable food policies. We're quite lucky to enjoy a huge amount of support at the moment from our Cabinet Secretary for the Environment around the food agenda. He sees schools as being a huge method of delivering sustainable change and behaviour change when it comes to food. And obviously, when it comes to sustainable development strategy in education, the government is really behind that too. So the second thing is this UN decade. It finishes at the end of 2014, but there's been a lot of work done in Scotland to try and again make it part and parcel of what we do day to day. What I've done in this presentation is I've put lots of hyperlinks in, so if anybody's bored enough to want to read government policy documents about zero waste, you can click on them and have a look, but I'll not go into that much detail. But in terms of the UN decade, there were some key documents came out that really reinforced education for sustainable development and made it something that was attractive to schools, made it something that they could see as being something that could help to deliver their curriculum learning. Big document 2006, Learning for Our Future, set the path for the decade. And then in 2010, Learning for Change, which built on what had happened so far. In 2013, in March, the next document, which looks beyond the decade, which looks on building and sustaining that momentum, was approved by government. And in that, they stated that learning about sustainability is now an entitlement for all Scottish learners, and we're hugely excited and delighted to see that word entitlement, because that means it is now in policy that all learners in Scotland, not just in schools, but in our colleges and universities as well, will be learning about sustainability. So we're absolutely delighted that the government has seen to make that a policy document. In 2013, we've also set up a Regional Centre of Expertise, RCE, in Sustainable Development Education. This is a UN-based initiative. It's worldwide. It tends to be regions of particular countries. In England, they have the southwest of England as a Regional Centre of Expertise, but we thought we'd just apply as a whole country. And they said yes. So Scotland is the first country to be a Regional Centre of Expertise. And what that does is it brings together thinkers, policymakers, practitioners from schools, universities, the industry world, the economy, the government, brings us all together in a sort of policy group, a think tank, if you like, to explore how we can really make sure that all the good work that's happened during the decade doesn't finish when the decade finishes. So they're looking beyond the decade as to how we can take things forward. I don't know if something similar is happening here in Iceland, but certainly we found it very worthwhile because it's linking people together to share and inspire each other. So it may be something that happens here too. The last thing is the General Teaching Council for Scotland. They are the professional body that regulates the teaching profession in Scotland. To teach in Scotland, you have to be a member of the council. You have to be accredited by them. You have to be registered with them, and they monitor the performance of our teachers. So they're kind of the watchdogs when it comes to education. And what they've done is they helped us to design a professional recognition for teachers when it came to sustainable development in 2008, which a lot of our teachers have taken up. They've got reward and accreditation for their work in sustainability and the environment. So that was done by the council. This year, they've just launched something, again, that's extremely exciting. They've revised all of the standards that teachers must meet. And this is true of teachers who've just qualified, teachers who are practicing, and also teachers who are going for head teacher leadership jobs. And one of the 3 new core values in all of our standards for teachers is learning for sustainability. This is the definition that they've given in the standards. So it's very new, it's very unformed as yet, but we're hoping that in time we'll start to see this becoming part and parcel of every teacher's competence and capability. So we're quite lucky in that we've got this framework behind us when it comes to sustainable development in education in Scotland. But obviously that's only part of the picture. The real work is done by people like yourselves and the children in the schools in terms of how do you link your curriculum to sustainable development. So, in terms of setting the scene, a little bit first about Eco-Schools in Scotland. Our structure is exactly the same as it is in all 55 countries that take part in Eco-Schools. Schools register, they implement the 7 elements of the programme, they take action on topics, and they apply for an award. In Scotland and in the rest of the UK countries, and also I think in the United States and Malta, we have bronze and silver as well as green flag. I don't know if you have that here. No. We decided a long time ago that going straight to green flag was a lot. So we implemented stepping stones along the way to make it easier for teachers to embed the learning and celebrate, because Eco-Schools should be fun. It should be something that's enjoyable. And we wanted schools to recognise the progress that they had made. So bronze and silver are diluted versions of the same criteria as you would put forward for green flag. It's the same, around 7 elements, but it's not quite as strong as it would be for green flag. In terms of green flag, we ask schools to send in an application form. We go and visit them. If they're successful, they get their flag, yippee, and a certificate, and then 2 years later we go and see them again, and so on and so on. And fingers crossed, they're always up to scratch and always up to standard. We offer 10 topics in Scotland. These are our topics here. Litter is coloured in because that's our mandatory topic. We have a big litter problem in Scotland. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Scotland, but one of the first things you probably notice when you get on the bus from the airport is the litter everywhere. So we decided, let's make it mandatory for our Eco-Schools. And it's an ongoing mandatory topic. So when they've got their first flag, they have to do litter. When they go for their second flag, they still have to do litter, as well as 2 other topics for each flag. Climate change in Scotland is divided across all the topics. We didn't want to make it a single topic on its own, so we've added in a bit about climate change with each topic. So when somebody's studying waste minimisation, for example, they'll be studying how waste impacts on climate change. If they're doing food in the environment, they'll study how food production can impact on climate change. So it's a little bit in every topic. It's kind of, rather than making it one big topic, we've divided it across the different topics so that they, no matter what topic they're doing, they're getting information on how to combat climate change. As I say, this is going to be available to everybody, so you can have a look at it then. This is where we're at so far. We have about 98% of our schools registered, but as everybody knows, registered doesn't mean very much. You can sign up and then get the handbook, and then you put it on a shelf and you dust it every so often and you forget about it. When it really starts to matter is when schools start to do something and we can reward them for it. So we've got about 72% who are starting their journey at bronze, and then up to nearly half with the green flag. This does present huge problems in terms of logistics. We are not a big team. We are 6.5 people for the whole country, so it makes it quite tricky in terms of keeping up to speed with everybody. We don't confine it just to local authority schools. A lot of independent schools in Scotland also take part. Okay, so this is why I'm here, to talk about linking to the curriculum. we needed to make Eco-Schools relevant to teachers. We needed to make it something that wasn't just seen as something they did on a Friday afternoon when it was sunny outside with a bored group of 12-year-olds. We wanted to make it something that was part and parcel of everything they did, that was embedded across all the work that they did in the school. So we decided the easiest way to do that was to really do a lot of work around how we could show the way in which they could deliver their curriculum learning, meet all the targets and expectations of the curriculum by doing Eco-Schools. So this is what we did. First of all, we mapped our curriculum. We spent 6 very boring weeks going through the whole curriculum, taking out themes at each level of our curriculum and mapping them to the 10 topics and also to the 7 elements. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. The second thing we did was to look at where Eco-Schools linked with other initiatives that are happening in school. Eco-Schools isn't just the only thing that's happening in Scottish schools. There are a lot of other programs and awards and things happening that we saw a direct link with. So we did a lot of work with that too. The third thing we did was to start collating case studies. The best way to learn is to speak to someone who's already done it or to read about something that's already happened. And teachers came to us and said, yes, we'd love to do Eco-Schools, but how do we do it? Give us ideas, give us suggestions. So we started to collate ideas and projects that we'd seen in other schools and then start sharing that across the country. The last thing we did was to really ask schools to start collating what they were doing themselves. So to really make a point of noting down curriculum outputs that linked to Eco-Schools, to make sure they recorded everything they were doing, not in a boring, tedious way. You know, it could have been a picture supplied by a child or a photograph of a class doing an activity, but it was enough to show how they were linking to the curriculum and then sharing that with their colleagues. So in terms of how we did it, first thing about the mapping of the curriculum. Quick word, first of all, about our curriculum. I was very kindly supplied some information about Iceland's curriculum, which I had a look at, and I'm very pleased to see that your curriculum is almost the same as ours in terms of its ethos and its kind of aspirations. There's a lot of stuff in your curriculum that mirrors what's in our curriculum, so hopefully the ideas that we've got will translate quite easily over to what you're doing. We completely overhauled our education system. It had become, when I was teaching, it had become a form-filling exercise. It was about ticking boxes, about children doing things and not really being part of the learning process almost. It was very much, I'm the teacher, I will tell you what you need to know. The children were just passively bringing in this information. So we decided to make it much more holistic, much more about making a person rather than just a little body full of facts and information. And to have it much more joined up from the preschool, the kindergarten, right through to 18-year-olds who were leaving school to go to university. So there was a continuity of experience from this height to that height, to try and make it more of a child-led process where children were actively engaged in their own learning and being enthused and learning to learn, rather than just sitting being told facts from a blackboard. So what we decided to do was to have a series of what we call experiences and outcomes. The idea being that here's the outcome, here's the piece of learning or the standard we want to get children to, but how they get there is up to them and the teacher. The experience is what counts, rather than it just being ticking a list. The experience that the child has to get that outcome is the learning. That's what we're looking to do. It's been in primary schools and kindergartens now for about 6 years or so, and it was phased into secondary schools. We're now at the stage where we have our first class of secondary school children going for their exams under this new system. So it's taken a while to come through. It didn't just throw it at everybody all at once. It started in the preschools and the primary schools, and it's come up now into the secondaries. In terms of the structure, as I say, it's about 3 to 18 to trying to get that sort of seamless experience for children, and it has 6 levels. Now, the levels are deliberately not age 5, age 7, age 11. The idea being that the child goes at their own pace. So some children might get to level 2 before other children, or maybe a little bit later than other children. It's much more child-led. Early is the level for preschoolers, then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then senior, which is the level for children who are going for examinations. Senior phase has just been written, and we're doing a lot of work around that at the moment. So in terms of the structure, we have 8 curricular areas. All of our curriculum is broken up into 8 areas. I'll talk a bit more about them in a minute. And these areas have their own specific outcomes. So there are experiences in these areas that lead to specific outcomes. We then have what we call the interdisciplinary outcomes. These are outcomes that go across the curriculum. So they're not just limited to maths or English or French or physics. They go across the whole thing. And then finally, what we call the 4 capacities. And this, it's a bit like an egg, I suppose. And the egg shell are these 4 capacities which underpin everything in the curriculum. And these are not academic capacities. They are about the child as a person. So I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment as well. Those are our 8 curricular areas. And under all those broad headings are things like English, maths, physics, biology, chemistry, etc. And as I say, they all have their own experiences and outcomes associated with them. Health and well-being is now a curricular topic in Scotland. It's been neglected for far too long. And in terms of health and well-being, it underpins a lot of what we do, whether it's physical health, mental health, emotional health. We do a lot of work with our children now around health. Scotland has a very unenviable reputation as being the sick man of Europe, and this is something we're really determined to get rid of. So I might not have that beer after all. So, the interdisciplinary outcomes, the things that cut right across our curriculum, there are 3 things that are the responsibility of every teacher. I was a French and German teacher, but I would still have been responsible for numeracy across learning and health and well-being. I would still have had to make sure that the children I was teaching were doing that. Even though I'm not a mathematician, I can barely add up, but I would still be responsible for delivering that in the curriculum. Other themes that cut across the curriculum: enterprise. We're trying to make our children more savvy, more kind of confident when it comes to the business world, and learning for sustainability. And in Scotland, learning for sustainability has 3 parts to it: global citizenship, being part of the wider world; outdoor learning. We're very keen, and we've got a couple of documents that I'll leave outside for you to have a look at about outdoor learning; and education for sustainable development. So these are things that are right across the curriculum and not just confined to one area. There we are. The 4 capacities. These took a long time to write. These were something that there was a lot of discussion about, a lot of arguments about, in terms of what did we want our young people to become. We didn't want them to just be little robots full of numbers and figures and statistics. We wanted them to be those 4 things. And those are the 4 things that underpin everything else in the curriculum. So Eco-Schools, when we first saw these final capacities, we were delighted, because that's exactly what Eco-Schools is about: creating responsible citizens who can take ownership of their environment, who can be confident enough to express likes, dislikes, suggestions, solutions, who can contribute to the bigger picture, who can contribute to make a solution, and who can learn through it as well. And we saw Eco-Schools as being ideal to meet all of those capacities, as well as a lot of the work that's done across the curriculum. Okay, so how did we map the curriculum? well, we made maps. So I'm going to do something clever now, I think, with the technology. Just bear with me a moment and show you, first of all, what I mean by the experiences and outcomes. So I'm going to do this, and hopefully it'll work. No, I can't get it to work. Ori, can you help? Oh, no, there we are. There we are. I think we've got it. Okay. We wanted to show how Eco-Schools could be delivered in subjects that weren't the most obvious home for an environmental programme. We had been in so many schools and heard fantastic stories about how schools were using the Eco-Schools framework to deliver things like expressive arts, language, science, as well as the more obvious ones like biology, chemistry, the things that you would expect to see in an environmental programme. So what I've chosen from the experience and outcome list, which is 134 pages of this kind of thing, is drama, which comes under the expressive arts heading. And what you've got there is the levels of the curriculum, so early, first, second, third, and fourth. As I say, senior is being written at the moment. And experiences and outcomes for each of them. Every experience and outcome has a code at the end, so that just tells you which experience and outcome it is. But when we looked at them, it was more a case of, well, we could link Eco-Schools to every single part of our curriculum if we really tried. Because what we had there, and I'll give you an example, it was a primary 3 class, so that's children who are maybe about 7 years old, and that would come under the first level of the curriculum. The experience and outcome there is, I have developed confidence and skills in creating and presenting drama, which explores real and imaginary situations using improvisation and script. And what this school had done was they'd written their own eco-play. It was all about an imaginary machine called the litter monster that went around and cleaned up the environment. The children had written the script. They had worked with older children in the school to do the lighting and the sound and all the technology. And then they'd presented this play to parents and grandparents and the community. And by doing that with an eco-focus, they were contributing towards their eco-evidence portfolio, but they were also learning and contributing to their curriculum output. So there was a win-win situation for the curriculum, but also for Eco-Schools. And not just in drama. By doing that project, they were contributing to being confident individuals as per the 4 capacities, the eggshell. There was a lot of interdisciplinary learning, as well as inter-stage learning between younger children and older children. So we thought, well, let's see if we can do that with the rest of the curriculum as well. So we did. And I've got copies of this outside for you to have a look at if you want. Unfortunately, I could only bring 1 copy. EasyJet don't allow me to bring a truck load of stuff. But they are on our website. They're free to download, so have a look, help yourselves. So this is the map that we did for the second level of the curriculum, which is children from roughly about the age of 7 to 11 or so. And what we did was we got in touch with teachers. We don't have the resource to do this ourselves. We rely hugely on other people to help us. So we got in touch with some of our teachers and said, help us do this, help us map the curriculum. So, pardon me, this is what we did first of all in terms of the 7 elements. Now, we deliberately made these documents Word documents because the idea is that teachers download them, use them as a starting point. This is not how to do the curriculum. This is just suggestions and ideas to get them thinking about it. And it's in a Word document so that teachers can amend it, delete it, add to it, do whatever they like with it. But we went around the 7 elements and we pulled out some of the curricular outcomes from across the curriculum. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. I know the text is tiny, so apologies for that. But under Eco Committee, up at the top left-hand corner there, the first outcome there is a health and well-being outcome. It's nothing to do with biology or science. It's a health outcome. And it says, representing my class, school, and/or wider community encourages my self-worth and confidence and allows me to contribute and participate in society. So that's an outcome for the health agenda, but it can be delivered through being part of an eco-committee. Another one, under action plan, which is on the right-hand side here, the very last one there is a technologies outcome. It says, having analysed how lifestyle can impact on the environment and Earth's resources, I can make suggestions on how to live in a more sustainable world. So again, by doing action planning, they're hitting a curricular output under technologies. So we found it was pretty easy, really, to look at the curriculum and think about it in a different way. We did the same for all of our 10 topics. This is the one for biodiversity, which is obviously, when you think about biodiversity, you think about counting animals, analysing their habitat, looking at behaviours, that kind of thing. But we had a look, and we managed to link it to quite a few other places, like geography, for example, and again, the health agenda. So there was quite a lot of crossover for all of them. So as I say, we've done that for all the 10 topics, and I've got the maps for early first, second, third and fourth level out there, but they're available online. Have a look if you want. Now this is where I have to do clever technology again, so bear with me. No. Nearly there. Okay. Yes, I want to just go back to that. Can I just do that? Yes, I can. 3, there we go. Okay. So those are our maps, and as I say, they went out to all teachers on the website. Have a look. We're revising them at the moment, and we're also building on one for the senior level. We haven't done that yet because the senior outputs have just been published by the government. Okay, the other thing that we did a lot of was to link to other initiatives that are out there that Scottish schools are doing. We wanted to do this holistic approach. We wanted to do this idea that nothing exists on its own. Everything is interconnected. Everything relies on everything else, to really show and strengthen what we were teaching our young people. So we got in touch with 3 of the biggest other awards that Scottish schools do and said, let's mutually support each other. And they were delighted, so that was good. And the 3 that we chose were ones that link really, really well with sustainable themes. The first one is a UNICEF-based programme called Rights Respecting Schools, which is based around the UN Charter on the Rights of the Child. And there's a lot in there about the right to clean water, the right to a safe environment, etc., etc. And what they were looking for was tied in very well with what we were looking for. The same with the Fair Trade Schools Award, obviously schools that are looking at the Sustaining Our World topic or the food environment topic. There's a huge amount of linking across those 2. The last one is one that is, I think it's just in the UK, John Muir Award. John Muir was obviously, as many of you'll know, a Scottish-born explorer who went to the States, United States, and was the father of the national parks in the United States. So Yosemite and Yellowstone were both founded by this fellow. So what they did was they set up an award in his name, and it's all about exploring and discovering wild places, conserving nature. And again, it links really well with Eco-Schools. So we said to them, well, how about if we say to schools that the work they're doing for your award links to the work for our award, rather than having separate amounts of work for teachers, because I'm a teacher myself. I know how onerous it can be and how boring in terms of having to collate evidence for everything. So we said, let's join up. So we have. We've also done quite a lot of national initiatives to link to the curriculum, trying to keep in mind that Eco-Schools should be fun. This kind of learning shouldn't be boring. It should inspire. It should enthuse. Our latest competition is the One Planet Picnic, which we hold every year at harvest time. And the idea is that schools hold a picnic, they invite the community, and the food they serve at the picnic has to be as eco-friendly as possible. So seasonal food, local food, or food with an ethical source, like fair trade, and they're asked to create recipes and share. We're hoping to go global with this next year and invite all the other Eco-Schools countries to take part in a One Planet picnic, and then it really will be a planet picnic. So we'll be talking a bit about that at the meeting of the Eco-Schools countries in a couple of days, actually. We also did a competition a couple of years ago for the International Year of Biodiversity around arts. We asked schools to pick their favourite Scottish animal and either write a poem, draw a picture, take a photograph, or an essay and send it in. And we had a competition for the best ones. And that was based around biodiversity. They had to tell us a little bit about their favourite animal, what it did, where it lived, the kind of habitat it lived in. Another thing that we've set up to help link Eco-Schools particularly to maths, because we always found that mathematics was a tricky one, is the school's global footprint calculator. What we did was we took 6 areas of Eco-Schools: water, energy, school grounds, buildings, etc. And we set up an online calculator to enable schools to work out, firstly, CO2 emissions, but also their ecological footprint. How many planets are you using? At the moment, Scotland's using about 3 planets worth of resource. So this kind of thing helps pupils to really understand the impact that they're having. Again, it's available for download. The calculator is available as well. And there's a teacher's handbook with lots of ideas for linking to the curriculum as well. The last thing on this slide is probably the most effective thing that we've done, though, with sharing about the curriculum. And that's we set up what we call professional learning communities, which are cluster groups across our local municipalities for schools to get together and share ideas and inspiration. Scotland's a small country, but our geography is difficult. We have a lot of islands, we have a lot of very bad roads, and getting from one place to another is expensive and takes a lot of time. But very often, the people who know most about the local problems and the local solutions are the people who actually live there. So we said, let's get schools in every authority who would be happy to act as hub schools, as leader schools, if you like. And the idea is that we have those for all different parts of Eco-Schools. So you might have one school that's really good at biodiversity. You might have another school that's really good at energy. Another school might have a really strong eco-committee structure. And the idea is that they get together and share with the people around them. And that's worked really well. It's taken a lot of pressure off the central team, but it's also worked really well in terms of, like today, people getting together, sharing ideas and talking to each other and coming up with strategies. Case studies, as I say, teachers asked us, how do we do it? You keep telling us we need to do this, but how do we do it? And what we found was that the easiest thing to do was to collect case studies of people who've already done it and how they did it. So we do it in 2 ways. We collate case studies centrally when our assessors go out to a school to assess it for green flag. When they do the reporting, we have a digital forum, and part of that forum is about, is this school a case study in any way? And if they are, if our assessors think, well, they're doing the energy topic really well, or they've got really good monitoring systems, they'll write it in this digital forum. And we can then share that content. We can download it and share it with everyone who wants to know about it. But schools themselves are the best source of sharing, as I've said. And wherever possible, we get them to share it through their own bulletins, sending it out to their local authority. We try and do that too through our social media. So we use Facebook and Twitter quite a lot. And we use other organisations to help spread good ideas and case studies. So whether it's local environmental organisations, local education organisations, we get them to help share case studies and information too. We do ask schools to do quite a lot of evidence gathering, but the way they do that shouldn't be tedious, it shouldn't be boring, and it should certainly involve the children themselves. When we go out to see a school, and it'll be the same here in Iceland. We want to talk to the young people, we want them to show us around, we want them to answer our questions, and we want to see evidence that they've been involved in everything to do with Eco-Schools. So when they send in their initial green flag application, we ask them to tell us, how have you linked to the curriculum? Give us ideas and evidence of how you've done that. We also ask our secondary schools, because we've found that secondary schools, I think this is true everywhere, are a little bit more challenging in terms of joining everything up. We ask them to do a curricular audit before they apply for green flag. Now, it's very simple. We just ask them to write down sustainable development work that's happened for each level of their school. But we also, when we go out to see a school for green flag, ask to see teachers' curriculum planning documents. We need to know how they're getting it into their day-to-day work. And we do a lot of work with schools in terms of showing them how to evidence that, using the map structure and saying that whenever you do something, if it's had an eco focus or an environmental focus, sustainable development focus, write down a quick note. Doesn't have to be anything major. We're not looking for a book. We just want a little note to show how they've done it. So nothing major. And that goes in their evidence folder. Now, the evidence folder should be contributed to and must be contributed to by kids as well. So we want the kids to be putting things in the evidence folder. For example, today we did this great project. We were outside measuring angles in the playground as part of our maths work. We were looking at the circumference of a pine cone and trying to work out how big it was. So ideas and information from the children as well. And that should happen as it happens. It shouldn't be left till the end of term when everybody's forgotten what they were doing. We say to schools, do it as you go along. As I say, back of an envelope. Don't recycle the envelope, write down your curriculum outputs on it and put it in your folder. Okay, so next steps, things we're going to do next, things that we haven't done yet. There's lots to do. We're incredibly busy. We're trying to develop the programme further in a challenging financial context. And the first thing we're trying to do at the moment is build an interactive map using Google Maps, where we can upload the information that's been collected by our assessors on the digital reporting form to showcase schools that we've visited that have been doing really good work. So the idea is that we have a map with lots and lots of words and themes at the side: biodiversity, energy, committees, monitoring. You click on a word and it brings up all the schools in that category. So there might be, click on biodiversity, you might get 10 schools that you can then see what they've done for biodiversity and such like. We're not technological experts in our team, as you've probably gathered, so we're waiting on some input for that. Second thing we're doing, further development of the curriculum maps. We've realised that the curriculum maps we've got so far, they're fine, but there's an awful lot more we can do with them. So we're revamping them at the moment to try and make them more inclusive, putting more information on. As I say, the new senior level is now out, and there's a lot of work to do to map that and show how that can be linked to Eco-Schools as well. But the ongoing thing is to look at cost-effective ways to get teachers to share with each other. We're using technology quite a lot, things like Skype. We get schools to Skype each other, particularly schools in remote parts of Scotland where actually physically visiting another school just isn't going to happen. So, and wherever possible, we ask them to use the kids to do that. So it's kids talking to other kids. But equally, getting days like today, trying to get them to happen in the local authorities, trying to get the local authorities to organise days like this as well, so that people have the chance to talk to each other and not just listen to people like me talking, people actually having the chance to have a coffee, share ideas, share inspiration, and take it forward.